If you have a Bible, let me encourage you to turn over to 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 20, where Paul is giving a warning to this young preacher, Timothy. He says, "Oh, Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to you, avoiding worldly and empty chatter and the opposing arguments of what is falsely called knowledge," or in some versions it actually says falsely called science. Do I think that there are people out there who are maybe abusing the truth? Paul said it well in Romans chapter 1. Again, if you've got a Bible, let me encourage you to flip over to Romans chapter 1, where in talking to the Christians at Rome, Paul says this: "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness," verse 18. He said, it's revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. Notice this: who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. There were people back then who were suppressing the truth. And I think there are people today who are doing the same. You've probably heard of a man by the name of Charles Darwin. He is elevated in many people's eyes as one of the greatest scientists of all time. And yet, what I bet you probably don't know is the only degree that Charles Darwin ever received. It was a degree in theology. It was in Bible. He had grown up planning on following in the footsteps of his dad. He was sent off at a very young age of 16 to Edinburgh University. But it was there he discovered that he just quite literally did not like blood. He didn't want to do medicine. So his dad realized there was one profession that could kind of save the family name. And that is if he were to become a preacher. So he packed him up, sent him off to Cambridge, where he received the only degree that he would ever get in theology. While at Cambridge, he met a guy by the name of Stephen Henslow. Henslow was a botanist. He was a teacher on staff, but he loved collecting plants, flowers. He would often take Charles Darwin out. They would try to find new species of flowers and plants. And it was Henslow who realized Charles Darwin had a knack for collecting things. And in fact, he got him a volunteer job, a position the year that he graduated on a boat. The boat was called the HMS Beagle. It was supposed to be a 2-year journey around the globe. Ended up lasting about 5 years. And during those 5 years, Charles Darwin learned quite a bit about himself and about the world. He learned, for instance, number one, that he was very prone to seasickness. His autobiography talks a lot about him spending time in the bottom of that boat, throwing up. But he also learned that he was a pretty good naturalist. He could collect things. So picture in your mind this boat making its way up the coast of South America. They get to Ecuador and they head out on the equator and they come across this little group of islands called the Galapagos Islands. A couple of years ago, I was there kind of walking in Darwin's footsteps. I tell you, it's a place where you're going to see things that you won't see anywhere else on this planet. So he's there, he sees these massive tortoises that you can ride. He sees these blue-footed birds. And he saw some finches. 13 of them, to be exact. 13 different finches, different beaks on them, different coloring, different sizes. And Charles Darwin, he decided that surely God had not put 13 individual types of finches on these islands. Surely what happened is these finches somehow made their way 500 miles off the coast of Ecuador to the Galapagos Islands. There was maybe an original pair that then over time gave rise to all the different varieties of finches. So in his notes, he actually drew this branching diagram. He goes home, he writes his popular book on the origin of species, in which he took that branching idea and he applied it to everything. He went from microevolution, the idea that, things can change a little bit here, a little bit there, and he applied it to everything coming from a common ancestor, something we know didn't happen today. So here you have a man who he had a degree in theology, and yet he spent most of his life actually teaching and professing falsities against God. He basically was rebelling. Now, one of the obvious questions might be why? Charles Darwin lost a daughter when she was rather young. It was a daughter he greatly loved. And it was that particular incident that started the wedge between Charles Darwin and the Creator. He couldn't figure out why would a loving God allow his daughter to die. And as his fame started growing, so did his ego and his pride. He grew his theory to the point that today he has been elevated as one of the greatest scientists of all time. Everyone thinks that his theory has been proven a fact, not realizing it is not a fact for sure. It's really bad science. It can't explain the origin of life, how we got males and females. And realistically, when you stop and really analyze what Charles Darwin was teaching, you realize this is a man who was espousing atheism. The Bible says in Psalm chapter 14, verse 1, "The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works." Let me encourage you. Next time you hear somebody say that man just evolved or that all of this just happened by chance, I want you to take a moment, be still, know that there is a God. Think about the complexity, the diversity of life, and start asking some of the tough questions. How do you get a male and female? What about emotions? What about all the different intricacies of a cell that evolution can't explain? I hope as you study and as you think on these things that you'll grow in your faith and realize that yes, there is a God. He is alive and the heavens declare his glory. Again, think on these things.